You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, as you can tell, we're here. It's Friday, but we're not live. This is a pre-recorded show, but hey, the premiere, 8 o'clock. More than likely, the difference is I don't think either one of us are really chatting with you. We are probably firmly ensconced in Cobra Kai right now. Probably our bellies are full of pizza and good cheer and probably watching Cobra Kai. So unfortunately, that in full transparency, that's the reason. It's the only reason why we're not live with you guys right now. It's because priorities. Yes. And it is a tradition. Exactly. It just so happens they released it on a Friday this year. So, hey, whatever. But we're not here to talk Cobra Kai. I'm sure you and I are probably doing that as we speak. Or
speaking.
As we're actually on. But we're here to talk some Star Wars. And we finally, in the glut of Star Wars news that we've got this week, believe me, it was really hard to pick a topic. And I'm sure we have a couple that we can hold over to Monday, and which should be, by the way, the next Friday. And that Monday should be the next time that we're live with you guys. But we actually got a little bit of Acolyte news. Now, there's not a whole lot of earth-shattering stuff. There's a new casting announcement. There's some production updates. But again, it's not really, I guess, the most earth-shattering news that we could possibly have. However, considering that this show is not coming out until probably well into next year, we do have some, at least for the first time, we have some significant news. Because up until now, all we've had is a concept.
Right. This has been a thing that I've been, waiting anxiously to find out about, because, Acolyte is a show that I'm really looking forward to, because as I've aforementioned before, this is a glimpse into the dark side of things. We've often seen what transpires, when a youngling wants to become a Jedi, and that whole process, and becoming a Padawan, then a Jedi Knight, and then eventually a Master. But we haven't seen anything what's going on the dark side and how that process works. And so I think we're going to get a little bit of that background in this particular show, The Acolyte, which, like you said, is set to premiere sometime in 2023. But we do have news that is actually getting ready to start filming in October.
Yes. So that's actually the first thing that we could probably talk about a little bit, is that they're going to start shooting this thing in October. And honestly, one of the cool things is we actually have some set photos. Now, this whole story, everything that we're covering basically has come from the direct.com. That's one of the news sources that we get a lot of stories from. There's Screen Rant, there's the Direct, there's that one comic book, comic something. Well, next time that we do a story from them, we'll actually remember the name. But there's a lot of different outlets. And then, of course, StarWarsNewsNet.com. And then, of course, Star Wars itself, right? Lucasfilm, they put out a bunch of various stuff. And we're not necessarily a show that breaks news per se, although sometimes I'm sure that we're probably one of the first to maybe do a video on some of the stuff. But for the most part, we're a discussion show. Something comes to the attention of the fandom, and we're just like you guys. We talk about it, except we talk about it in a big community, at least one day, a big community on YouTube. So we did manage to snag some of these, these set photos. So they're starting to build this set. And it's actually pretty cool how the direct.com, at least, I don't know where they got these photos from, to be honest, but you could see that they're starting to build a little bit here. And And again, these aren't super spectacular in the sense of you're getting an idea of the sets or anything, but you do get a little bit of the scope of this thing, where you saw that it was in a big kind of a field type of a thing, and they're starting to at least construct these sets, and you can at least get a feel for what, I don't know if you want to really call it the size or the scope or whatever, but I
The
think
scale of it.
yeah, I mean, a little bit of the scale of it. I mean, I think it's kind of cool. And again, these set photos aren't necessarily earth-shattering or anything. I mean, if I told you that, a new mall was going up and this is the start of it, you probably would be like, okay, cool, whatever. But I think that the important thing that we can take away from those set photos is the fact that they're actually starting to finally do something. That there's movement on this thing. Because, again, like I said, up until then, all we've had is announcements and, start dates and
news clip
concepts.
here and there.
Yeah, a news clip here and there, exactly. Some concepts maybe. We had the one casting announcement of Amandla Stenberg, I think her name is. Yes. So we did get a new cast announcement, though. Jodie Turner-Smith, who, if you saw the movie Queen and Slim, she was one of the stars of that one. So it's actually kind of cool to me that they're starting to at least give us an idea of who's going to be in this thing. Even though, again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Because I remember we did that whole show on Obi-Wan where there must have been like 12 or 15 cast members or something like that we focused on that show. And we still didn't really know what it was about, really. But at least you see some movement, and at least you're getting somewhat of a feel for the type of characters we might see.
Yeah, even to add to that casting, that's why I've been, looking down for those who've been wondering. Looking at my phone. So Squid Game star Lee Jong-jae actually joins the cast as well.
Okay.
He's actually been confirmed to join the Acolyte cast. And this is as of 7 hours ago. So
always an update. That's why it's really hard to put these shows together sometimes, because it's just like, oh, maybe I just put this whole other show together. Well, we should probably be talking about this, and then it's Monday, and then by Monday, 20 people have done videos on it already, and then we look like we're behind the 8 ball. But that's just the nature of things right now. So that's cool. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just happened to, as I was kind of looking to see if there was any more info on it, that popped up, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So for those of you who are fans of the very popular movie Squid Game, that was on Netflix,
the series, really.
Series,
that was,
yeah,
and it was a great. I heard they're going to do a season 2 on that.
Yeah,
it was phenomenal. And
crazy,
I actually
phenomenal.
I mean, I ended up, and I watched the Korean version too, and put the subtitles on because everybody was saying that. And I tried to watch the English version of that, and it was awful. I couldn't even do it. It's like I would much rather read the subtitles and get the actual actors acting than that horrible English dub that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's a star that's in it. Like I said, if you guys have seen Queen and Slim, Jodie Foster Turner is going to be in there. So and we're getting, like I said, we're just getting more news about the Acolyte, which is really exciting because we know something is moving forward. And that's one of the big things about Star Wars right now is that there are a bunch of different projects that have been announced, but sometimes you don't hear too much information on it, so you don't know where we are in the process of it. Like, okay, are they still doing it? Have they picked anybody to play any of the characters? What is the story even about? That type of stuff. So it's great to see, even with the set photos, okay, it's actually moving forward. We're seeing the money going into the show. So that's what's really cool about those set photos, and the fact that we're getting these announcements of specific people who are going to be our characters for the series.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think another thing that's really cool, again, about these set photos is that you can begin to now realize, hey, there's something moving on this, and we can actually now envision this thing being released. Because the problem is, when things are still in concept, the release date could move. It could shift anywhere in the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, look, sometimes even a completed series. We just did the show about the Bad Batch, where they had just seemingly taken it off of the schedule. And then, of course, last week, I think that was our last show, actually, was a week ago today, where they had put it back on the schedule. So nothing in Star Wars really is safe from virtually anything. And it's kind of like you actually said, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is the fact that you just really don't know. You get all these announcements, and then there's either no movement on it, or maybe they give you a little bit of a story detail, and you just don't really know, is this thing going to happen or not? I mean, look at Lando.
Mm-hmm.
They announced it. They showed us a logo, but where is it? I mean, and we haven't heard squat from that one.
Not at all. Yeah.
That, to me, that's the biggest. I could almost do a whole show. What's funny about this is I can almost do a whole show on that, on Lando, even with no information. And it's not even just the obvious, which would be, hey, what are we going to do as far as concept or characters or which Lando's going to be in it or any of that stuff. I think we could actually do a bulk of the show on just using that as yet another example about how Lucasfilm will make all these promises and they just don't deliver. And I'm not saying that, look, production problems happen. You can't always blame everything on the studio, right? I mean, just you can go into it with the best of intentions, but sometimes things just don't. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't materialize for whatever reason. Maybe you have a problem with the director, or we know that's legendary. And that's the other problem too, is that sometimes I think with Lucasfilm, what ends up happening is they end up shooting themselves in the foot because they'll make all these big grandiose announcements, but they don't have a firm plan in place. They don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Maybe they know a concept. They have no idea what the director's actually going to do with it. And that's what makes Star Wars a little bit different. You can't just say, hey, this thing's coming out and whatever, because it's going to be under a lot of scrutiny. So you have to really understand what it is you're making when you announce these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I would rather them scale it down to like projects that they know absolutely without question that they're going to make, and really just make sure those are done, then give me a smorgasbord of things, and maybe only 2 of them come to fruition. You know what I mean? But with the Acolyte, like I said, going back to this particular series, like I said, I'm just really excited about it because I really would love to see. I've always wondered, like, what are things like on that side? Because I know there is a process. You just don't wake up a Sith Lord or anything like that. Like, you have to train just like the Jedi do. But what is that like, for them? What are there any things that's similar or different? We all know they have different rules, as far as like their motto, their mantra, as far as how they go about certain things. So I'm really curious to see what the Acolyte has for us. And now that we've got some of these characters, now I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, well, who are they going to play now? I mean, this is another unfamiliar territory, like The Mandalorian. It's not a show like Boba Fett where we kind of know, okay, we know Boba Fett and we know Tatooine. We kind of know those type of characters. But I think we're dealing with characters that we've never seen before. This is taking place way before Phantom Menace, probably about 200 years or something so before Phantom Menace, something like that.
No, it's actually only 100.
100 years is right. It's not that's the High Republic. So so this is, like I said, but it's still a significant amount of time though. And so I'm really just curious as to see, like, okay, how are we going to pull this off? What references are they going to make? Are we going to hear anything about Bane or Revan or anything like that? Are we going to hear about the history of the Sith? So those are a lot of my questions that I have, and that's what makes me really anxious for the show.
Well, and not to mention the fact that, and this is basically piggybacking off of your point in a way, but we either see the Sith Lords as fully formed.
Mm-hmm.
So, Palpatine's like, hey, my, assistant, Darth Maul or whatever, and he pops out. Or in the case of Dooku, or in the case of Sidious himself, actually. Or we see the Sith Lords where they're starting to turn to the dark side. Anakin obviously being the prime example of that. But I think that one of the things that makes this show so interesting is the fact that finally we get to see the in-between. We get to see, okay, you're a Sith Lord now, and how does that happen as well? Because is it always a disillusioned Jedi, or maybe it's somebody who is already, I guess, demonstrating evil tendencies or something, or is Palpatine or somebody of that ilk, maybe Bane, maybe Plagueis, are they looking for somebody much the same way that the Jedi go and they actually try to identify all the Force-sensitive beings and try to take them as children in order to then train them from the ground up, right? Because one of the reasons why they always train kids, especially babies, is so they can actually raise them right from the get-go. They don't have to try to unteach, have them unlearn stuff, or they've developed bad habits, or
deprogram them.
Yeah, pretty much, because their parents have instilled certain things. Yeah, it's basically they could just pretty much start with a blank slate. And I think that that's one of the really important elements of the Jedi. Now, the Sith, on the other hand, I can almost see where it would be more advantageous to take somebody, maybe not necessarily as a baby, but either as a young child, a teen, or something like that, where they're experiencing turmoil and really high emotion and stuff like that, and then use that and then train them in the Sith way. But again, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see them where I think a prime age, honestly, would be like the preteen area. Like if you did 11 or 12, between 11 and 13 years old,
because they're already evil anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
and then
it's
they're
middle
also
school.
very emotional. It's middle school. Yeah, for those of us who remember your middle school days, you know how people were back then. But on top of that, though, it's the you're trying to figure things out, and you're starting to develop your true independence, around that time, and you really want to start, branching out and trying to do things on your own. And I think that's a great time to, if you were to turn a child into the dark side, that would be the prime age to do it. I was reading something, like I said, we got this from the direct, and it says leading the way in this effort will be reportedly to be director Kate Herron, who had the same position with Marvel Studios on Loki season 1 and delivered excellent results for fans and critics alike. So, you watching Loki, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, the thing that's interesting is I actually really enjoyed Loki. I understand the criticisms of at least some of them, but there were a lot of people that did not like it, though. They really weren't into the whole concept. Even though I would argue that Loki is actually probably the most important. If you're trying to go see all these Marvel Phase 4 movies where they're dealing with the multiverse and all this stuff, Loki season 1 is almost required viewing. Because even if you understand it, you're not going to get as much enjoyment out of it. And of course, Owen Wilson is amazing in it. Tom Hiddleston, naturally, as Loki. I thought he did a really, really cool job portraying, because Loki is almost like he's like kind of a prisoner and he's a normal guy. And I kind of wish that they had gone into the direction that they were going in the middle of the season, where Loki and Owen Wilson's character, I forgot the character's name, but they were basically like cops. like detectives. It was like almost like a Law and Order kind of thing where you partner and you go out and you're solving these weird crimes. And it was a really cool concept. So if you actually take that and apply that to the Star Wars universe and you put that into the context of the Sith and the time period in which they're developing this series, which is around 100 years before the Phantom Menace, I think it could actually yield some really cool results. But again, it's going to be one that divides fans if it's anything like Loki.
Do you think it was a direction or was it a story?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's hard to separate the two, right? Because when you look at a story on paper, the direction, honestly, is... I mean, even the production design, there's just so many elements where a lot of times people will single out maybe one different aspect, or one of the specific, I should say, aspects of a film or series. And if they don't like it, or if they do like it, depending on what they're doing, right? They're either going to credit it or they're going to try to destroy it based on, oh, the direction was bad or the production design was horrible. Sometimes you can actually do that. You can isolate certain things. A great example, staying in the Star Wars universe, is when we talk about the prequel trilogy, right? We talk about George Lucas's epically bad direction, but yet the production elements were good. Even though I think he overdid it a little bit on the digital effects. Practical would have been nice, some practical. And you can also isolate the story and say, look, the story was great. It was just the direction and somewhat the production design where you have an actor in just a green room. And okay, now you have to pretend and interact with all these people. And it's like, well, there's nobody here. I mean, especially at a time when this is all new, I think that had a lot to do with the wooden delivery of the actors. Because you're taking like these Oscar-winning actors. And,
I was just about to say that. Yeah, you got these seasoned veteran actors who Samuel L. Jackson, Liam Neeson. You got
Natalie Portman. I mean, yeah, you're taking these actors, and it's like, look, you don't have slouches here as far as the acting goes, and yet the performances were not standing up to what these actors are normally able to do. And so in those cases, yes, you can isolate certain things like the direction. But I think unless you're really studied in film and in the process, and look, there's a lot of fans that are, right? I mean, just like there's music fans who really understand music. Sometimes they can't even play an instrument, but they know music, though. You get fans who just really know film because they love it so much and they spend so much time in it. Those type of people... If you're one of those type of people, yeah, you're going to be able to maybe separate a little bit better the direction, the story, the production design, any of the other elements that you want to pick on or praise. However, I think for a lot of people, it's really difficult to say, well, what is it that people don't like? Is it a concept? Is it the execution? And in the case of the execution, well, execution of what? Was it the directing? Was it the acting? Was it the writing? So there's so many elements that, and even going on that, if you take something like Loki, and I said that I think that fan opinion will be very much divided if the Acolyte is handled in the same way as Loki. On the other hand, maybe it works for that. Maybe the problems that people had with Loki and the way that it was handled there, maybe if you apply that to the Star Wars universe, particularly this story, because I also think that you can't just say, well, this storytelling technique or this particular element or whatever won't work in the Star Wars universe. Well, maybe it will, but maybe you have to find the right story and the right project in order to do that. So I think that it might be kind of tough. I mean, look at the book of Boba Fett. A lot of people, even that didn't like it, or maybe just thought it was okay, their main problem with it was just the characterization of Boba Fett. That's really what it came down to. Is that people thought he was a little too soft and,
Well, that too, but I will say that also we spent too much time with the Tusken Raiders. That was another big glaring thing that a lot of people didn't like. I mean, I understand why they did it. I understand the concept of
Yeah,
whatever, but I
yeah,
think for a lot of fans, they kind of wanted something different.
yeah. I mean, that is a good point too. Is they did spend a lot of time on that Tusken Raiders storyline, and I think that in some cases was necessary to tell the story they wanted to tell. On the other hand,
Mhm.
that maybe there was a way that they could have tied that together without being so. I don't
I think
know.
it took the wind out of a lot of people's sails. I think people were like really hyped about it, like, "Oh, Boba Fett, we're going to see him be this crime." And I think it marries to your point, where like on one hand they're thinking like, "Okay, we're going to get this really like hardcore, hard hitting Boba Fett that we saw in the Mandalorian." They thought we were going to get that in this particular series, and then you see him being all benevolent and kind of cool and chill and laid back, and you're like, "Wait a minute,
You know what? I
this
didn't
isn't
mind that
this isn't
though.
a fear." Oh, I didn't either. I mean, I think but see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think because people see Boba Fett, I mean, I think people look at him no different than they do Vader, right? Vader is this big, imposing, this juggernaut that is just like, okay, there's almost nothing that Vader can't do. You know what I mean? And he's just that powerful. He's cool. His outfit looks awesome. He has this booming voice. Like everything about Vader is just like, all right, just he's the he's the bad mofo in the room, right? But then, and people look at the same way at Boba Fett too. And it's like, okay. And then of course when you see him in Mandalorian, you get that glimpse like, yeah, this is what it is. But people don't understand that that's a job that he does. It's no different than like a police officer or a military person, right? Like
Hmm.
when I'm a person who's in the service in the military, yeah, if you only see them on the battlefield, like, yeah, you're going to see the bad mofo in the room because that's what he has to be there at that point. But when he's at home with his family, and he's relaxing with his wife and kid, like he doesn't have to be that anymore. He can actually just take off the fatigues, or in this case for Boba Fett, take off the helmet and just try to be cool. You know what I mean? And I think people just weren't ready for that type of characterization of a character who they've always looked at as the bad mofo in the room, and I think
Well, but
that's kind of it skewed people's, opinion of Boba Fett.
yeah, but I think actually what made it even worse, I think people could have. I think a lot of people would have been fine with that, except for a couple of things. Because on one hand, it's really it broadens and it deepens the character. I mean, one of the problems that I think people had overall with the Boba Fett thing is that if you reveal too much, he loses his mystique. So I don't even necessarily think that it was so much that he, you know, was revealed to be a little bit more cuddly, let's say, than what we were originally led to believe. I think it was just that if you start revealing too much, but really what I honestly think the biggest problem that where what you're talking about comes into play is the fact that they spent too much time in the flashbacks.
Hmm.
Once you see him in the Mandalorian, you're like, okay, well now I want to see what he's doing now. I want to see what's next. And then they would tease you with that, but you knew as soon as he goes back in that bacta tank, we're
Yep.
going back in time.
Hmm.
And it's
Like the
just
little
like,
DeLorean.
yeah. And the other problem is, not only are we flashing back, we're not exactly flashing back to when this guy was kicking butt with Jabba the Hutt here. We're flashing back to when he was basically a prisoner of the Tusken Raiders, and
Yeah,
a
this is
lot of people,
post Return of the Jedi.
yeah, yeah,
This is
you
after he's
know,
out of the Sarlacc. So yeah.
right. And I mean, I get it, and in a way, I mean, I do think that that was cool. I think that that was, but again, where I wouldn't necessarily agree with people wanting to cut that part out, because I also actually kind of like, and they started this with The Mandalorian, but they really kicked it up with the Book of Boba Fett, where they really gave you more depth to the Tusken Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Where some people were kind of like, oh, come on, dude, these guys are like side characters and you're giving me an entire series on them almost. But
Right.
it helps, right? Because we're always saying, look, we want to break away from the Skywalker saga. We want to do all this stuff. And as soon as you do it, everybody starts whining about it. So I think that if they hadn't spent so much time in flashbacks, I think you know, might have been a little bit better.
So, okay. So, since we're talking about expectations, then what are your expectations for Acolyte?
Well, my hopes and my
What do you?
expectations
Let's
are probably
well,
a
let's
little
just say
different.
let's start here. What would you like to see?
A good story. I mean, I'm not. Look, I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I mean, you know, unfortunately, you have to. These are the kinds of things you have to say now.
Oh, I agree.
You know, I mean,
I totally get it.
I guess what I would like to see, if we're talking about the storyline, is, and again, I mean, it's really interesting because this thing is so open ended. You can go almost anywhere with it. So I might actually have some hope or expectation of where I think that this thing should go, to the point that I'm almost married to an idea, and then they might give me something that is mind-blowingly cooler,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something I never even thought of, which I suppose you could actually say that's one of my hopes, is give me something different and really cool. Because again, this is another one of those things. If you're going to go in certain realms of Star Wars, you can't mess it up. If you're going to go, hey, let's see what it's like on the Sith side of things and show their whole training and their whole thing, it's like, okay, the upside is that's a really, really awesome thing. The downside is, as Jack Nicholson said in Batman, better be sure.
To be sure.
You know, you're going to have to get this thing right. You can't mess that up. Because, and here's the thing, and I like to point this out a lot. You're not just messing with the little piece of canon that you're carving out. You're actually affecting the entire franchise. Because once you start putting things in place, you're defining it. You're defining canon. And I think that that's the difference between coming up with a story that just is a really cool story within the Star Wars universe versus actually putting out stuff that's like redefining or defining canon.
So what I'm hearing is that you will prefer them to keep it more vague.
Well,
Like
no.
you wanted them to kind of keep it. Well, what I'm saying is like you said with with Boba Fett, like when they bring too much, it kind of diminishes some
Only with
things.
Boba
But if you
Fett,
kind of
though.
keep okay,
Only with Boba Fett. I mean, with the Acolyte, well, first of all, I think it's going to depend on a lot of things. And this is why, I'm not trying to be so vague or wishy-washy about this whole thing. It's just that it's almost like we need more variables in order to have something to hang this foundation on, right? Because a lot of it depends on who is the Sith Lord that's doing the training. We're only going 100 years before the Phantom Menace. So,
well, we don't. Well, yeah.
I mean,
we don't know if there's going to be a Sith Lord yet. But what I'm saying, I guess. But I see what you're saying, though.
Well, anything like a dark side user. It's kind of like, depending on how they're spinning this, it's got to be a Sith Lord. And the reason why I say that is because everything I've read about this is bringing up the fact that this is what the Sith are doing when people think that they're not around. That's basically what all these different articles and stuff have said.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to deal with a series that is dealing with this is what the Sith are doing when nobody thinks that they're around, and you're dealing with an Acolyte, which is like the Sith version of a Padawan, you got a Sith Lord. I mean, that's basically you're just telling us that. So it really depends on who it is. Because if you go with somebody like Darth Bane or Darth Plagueis, now these guys have been written about quite a bit in the old legends. However, and this is something that people forget, they have been canonized, but their story hasn't been. So in other words, Darth Bane exists in the new canon. However, all the stuff that was written about him in Legends isn't necessarily carrying over into this new canon, so they could redefine him, very similar to what they did with Thrawn.
Well, that brings up a very pivotal question, though, because, all right, so we know Palpatine mentioned Darth Plagueis the Wise, and that was Plagueis was Palpatine's master. This takes place 100 years prior to the events of the Phantom Menace.
Yep.
So, are we going to see the training of Plagueis? Are we going to see?
No. I know.
Because I mean, my
just
thing,
like, dude, really? I mean, like,
I
just
guess
cut
you
you
got the
off,
script
right?
over there with you. So like,
Exactly. It just like I cut you off immediately. Like, no, that's not. No, here's why I say that. Because remember, the Phantom Menace, right? Okay, it takes place 100 years after this thing. Palpatine in the Phantom Menace is probably, I don't know, like 50. So, Plagueis, he's already killed Plagueis by this point. So now, 100 years before, Plagueis is probably still active. I don't think that he's been trained. Obviously, it's a little bit too... It's probably not too long before Palpatine actually begins to be trained by Plagueis.
Well, yeah, that's what I was getting to, because I'm like, all right, and you were on the right path as I was kind of coming to it. Is, yeah, Palpatine is probably like 50 years old by the time we get to a Phantom Menace, right? So that means that he's already been trained. He's already like super powerful, and like you said, he's already killed Plagueis by this point. So that's what I mean. Like, okay, are we going to see a Plagueis already established, and he's kind of doing the thing? Like, is he kind of like the Jedi Knight, or on his way to becoming a master? Is he already a master at this point? Because we don't know if Plagueis is entirely human. He may be humanoid in
He's humanoid.
features,
He's not human. At
but he
least,
may not be human.
yeah, he's not.
So
If you've ever actually seen him,
now,
yeah,
I know, right?
right.
So per canon now, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if they change it, you see what I'm saying? Like, we
I
don't
don't think
know.
they're going to change that. That's some, but no, here's my point though, and this is what I was talking about. So if Palpatine is around 50 years old, you basically have, maybe like 60 years. This is going to be taking place around 60 years, 40 years, somewhere around that before Palpatine is born. So if you figure somewhere between 40 and 60, it really just depends on how they're playing with the time here.
Come on, yeah.
You would think that it would be inconceivable to me that you'd be showing Plagueis being trained, because that would mean he would have to be trained, and it takes years to master this stuff.
Well,
So
depending on, like I say, if he's a prodigy, though, like that's what I'm saying. Like, he could be a prodigy like Anakin.
well, that's what I'm saying. So that's why I say that that makes it even less likely that we're gonna say, because yeah, it's true. I mean, it's almost kind of like Grogu, right? I mean, he's already exhibiting Force stuff, but still, it just seems to me that you can't. I guess you could, and he just takes to it really quick.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like for example, Anakin, right? He's a prodigy. So by the time we get to what, episode 3, he's what, 25?
Yeah,
Thereabouts?
23 maybe.
23, 24, yeah, somewhere in there. All right. Well, and him being a human, it's like, all right, and he's this prodigy. I mean, like you said, it didn't take him long. So
that's still 16 years, though.
But he's practically a master at that point, though.
Yeah, but he was also born of the Force too. It's a
Yeah,
little
I
bit
mean that's
different, than
we don't know if Palpatine's the only. I mean, we don't know if Anakin was the only one who was like that though.
well, the thing is that's true. And actually one of the things that has been uh, basically
Theorized.
theorized or postulized or whatever you want to say is the fact that the Force brings out multiple children. That's kind of how they were trying to explain Rey in a way. Although she wasn't born of
Mm-hmm.
the Force, she was born kind of as a, oh, I don't know, a little experiment, shall we say. But I mean, it
Test tube
really
baby.
depends because, look, there's been a lot of books about Plagueis. There really has. Now,
Hmm.
I admittedly have not read any of the Plagueis Bane books, but I do know a little bit about him. He was not somebody that just magically took to the thing and everything else. If they actually deal with Plagueis, if it's only 100 years before the Phantom Menace, it's probably going to be either he's already trained or maybe he's like freshly trained or whatever.
Mm.
Because it's true, he's got another, you know, maybe 20 or so years, 30, 40, something like that, till he starts getting a hold of Palpatine. But again, we don't know, right? I mean, it could be
Mm-hmm.
because we always thought that maybe they were going to do the whole Bane rule of two thing. It just seems like 100 years before the Phantom Menace. I don't think that's happening because I think the Bane timeline was
Mm-hmm.
way, way, way
Wait,
before that.
yeah.
Probably somewhere between the Old and the High
Oh,
Republic.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'd have to actually go back through a lot of the Sith stuff because I'm trying to remember around the time that Bane was even a thing. It could have been around the beginning of the High Republic, actually. But remember that during the time of the High Republic, everybody's assumed that there's no Sith anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when it's the zenith and the high time for the Jedi. And then the Acolyte is taking place toward the end of that era.
Right.
And so the idea is that Sith have popped up, but nobody knows it. I mean, this is even before they're really operating in the shadows. So it almost makes me wonder, in talking through this, if this is going to be almost like the Sith version of when we're seeing in a lot of these projects that take place between episodes 3 and 4, how we're seeing the building of the rebellion, how it started out being seeded by a couple of senators, and then it grows and grows.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to start to see the building of the Sith in very much the same way?
Well, yeah. I mean, especially with the rule of two. I mean, it's easier to kind of do that because
Mm-hmm.
if you're following the rule of two, you don't have this big. You're not like having a temple like the Jedi have. You got two guys who are just kind of doing their thing, so
Yeah.
it's easier to hide that way versus you know um having like a multitude of Sith running around.
Well, I mean, like you said, and again, this is really, it depends on how much they want to play with this in new canon. Maybe they shift the Bane timeline up past the Acolyte.
See, this is what makes this so intriguing for me. That's what I mean. Like,
Well, that's why we were able to discuss this as a topic for a show. I mean, if you think about it, we know here we're trying to do a show, and our shows are usually an hour long, right? And we're doing an entire show on something where you have a few set photos that could be a new, restaurant or
mall,
something
like you
popping
say.
up, yeah, or mall or whatever. I mean, there's really not a whole lot to go on here, but this is where that whole discussion comes in, and hopefully you guys are chatting and talking about this and leaving comments in the comment section about this, because this is when it's really some of the most fun times to discuss this stuff, is when you really don't know a whole lot. You know just enough to talk about this stuff endlessly with all your friends and us.
Yes, it's enough to get the wheels in your head turning.
Yeah.
Um,
Because look, there's
and
a pile of
that's the
stuff
fun
out
part
there.
about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, look, there's like 3 or 4 Mandalorian Season 3 stories floating around right now. There's like 2 Ahsoka ones, like big ones, too. There's like 1 or 2 Andor stories that are floating around. But the thing is, we've been talking about that now for weeks.
Yeah, Andor is right around the corner, literally.
Yeah, and again, that's a good point too, right? It premieres in, like, I don't know, 3 weeks or something. And same thing with The Bad Batch season 2. That's premiering like only a few days after, I think, Andor, or maybe it's before. It's one of those.
Yeah.
So, you have a situation to where really the next time I think we're going to talk about Andor is when we actually do the review. I mean, unless some really crazy story comes out about it. The Mandalorian season 3, yeah, we're gonna talk about that periodically as stuff comes out. We don't even have a real trailer for that yet. And then, of course, a lot of the speculation is coming from D23, which is, what is it, like, it might be this week. Now, see if you can look up when D23 is.
Okay.
It's it's either this week, next week. It's like literally right around the corner. I mean, it might even, today's Friday, it might even be starting now. I don't know. I've kind of lost track. We've been in kind of a bubble of work. That's why we weren't doing a show on Labor Day. Of course, we also wanted to give all of our American friends, our fellow Americans, the day off. Spend time with your friends and family. Don't have to watch us talk about Star Wars on that day. But pretty much, a lot of this stuff has passed by, and I know D23 is a big, big thing to where a lot of people think, hey, this is where we're finally going to get that first look at Ahsoka officially, the first real trailer for The Mandalorian Season 3, even though Celebration did have these things, they weren't made available to the public. D23 is where a lot of people are speculating we might get some stuff that might be for public consumption. Maybe we're going to get some updates. And hey, we might even get some updates on the Acolyte.
It's tomorrow. Starts tomorrow.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go. So we're going to know soon enough. And I mean, who knows? I'm sure that might actually drive what our Monday show is about. But
oh yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be news that's coming out of D23 that we're gonna want to.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about. Yeah, and again, a lot of this is a balance between we're going to talk about news, things that come out. We'll talk about concepts. We'll talk about virtually anything, just like you guys would with your own friends. And that's kind of what this is all about. So the Acolyte is now starting to become a little bit more of a reality. It's becoming a little bit more tangible. Like you said, it starts shooting in October, so now we're actually going to get some, probably, if not some leaked stills, something, I'm sure, maybe by the end of the year, we might get a trailer. Holidays.
Yeah, it's definitely coming.
But it's coming.
Possibly. It's coming.
It's coming. But the question becomes, we can just repeat that in case you didn't know, it's coming. But what are you guys thinking as far as the Acolyte goes? Do you think that this is something that is going to focus heavily on the Sith? Do you think that, I mean, they pretty much said it was, but I mean, I'm talking about really the more known characters.
How much?
Yeah, like is it going to be
it, how deep into it?
Yeah,
really going to go.
Is it going to be a Bane and Plagueis thing? Is it going to be new Sith Lord characters? What are you guys thinking? What are your thoughts on the casting announcements? Leave that in the comments section too. Let's start a discussion on all that because again, it's like I always say. All this stuff in Star Wars, first of all, it could change at any time, right? You can't even bank on a lot of the news. Like I just said earlier in the show, they had the Bad Batch on the release schedule for September, and then it disappeared. Now, it has since reappeared, but again, you never know where Lucasfilm, where Disney is going to go with Star Wars. You never know when internal strife is going to happen. You can have a director that's on a film who 80% into the thing suddenly gets fired. So nothing is certain in the land of Star Wars. So it's good to know that at least the Acolyte is moving forward. It has a definite shooting date. We're probably going to see it sometime next year. That's what they keep saying. If they're starting to shoot it this year, that's a good sign that we're going to see it next year. So I think what we could take away from this is that we're finally seeing some movement on this show. It's moving beyond the concept. Here's the general story. We got new cast members now that are pretty much locked in and ready to go. So I think we can now start to really get excited about the Acolyte and what it might be. So let us know what you guys are thinking in the comments section. As for Monday, since D23 is starting now, we're going to keep our eyes and ears open for what we might learn at D23. If there's a new trailer, if there's some new news or footage or stills or whatever, we will definitely talk about it. The only thing we might stay away from is if they announce anything about Vision Season 2, out of respect for Daryl.
Thank you.
It's bad enough we have to actually review the thing. It's kind of like, you know what, let's just not cover the news for that. But anything else, we will definitely keep our eyes on it and check back with us on Monday. Join us live, 8 o'clock. You guys know the drill for all of you who regularly watch us. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And, of course, join us every Monday and Friday, live at 8. On those times that we can't be live, you'll get a pre-recorded episode, but it'll premiere, so the chat will still be there so you guys can chat away. So until Monday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.